Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. So I was actually going to be doing this video yesterday. I even got it all prepared, pulled a bunch of stories, but I was just not in the mood to record for whatever reason, and I didn't want to make a crappy video. So let's hope this video doesn't turn out too crappy. Entitled Mom tries to rip my friend's hearing aid off. So this is my friend's story, so I'll be telling it like it's her talking. So I'm deaf. I have been since birth. At this point of the story, I had recently gotten hearing aids. If you don't know, hearing aids take a few weeks, even months, to get accustomed to. Now on to the story. Around this time, I was moving from my old apartment to my current house, and I was told to put something in the mover's truck. After I was done, I got those key cards you could scan to get into the apartment. Now, I wasn't looking, but apparently there was a mom and a kid behind me, so I just opened the door for myself and walked off. Now, I would like to note as well that since I'm adjusting to the hearing aid, this means that some noises can get loud for me. Behind me, I hear someone yell, "Excuse me," which, not gonna lie, hurt my ears a bit. I turn around, and there stood the entitled mom and her child, who looked about 10 or 11. I say, "Hi, sorry, is there something wrong?" She says, "You nearly hit my son and I with the door. You should have been more careful." I say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, ma'am." She says, "Maybe if you took that stupid Bluetooth out of your ear, maybe you would be able to know what's going on around you." I was confused at first. Then I realized she was talking about my hearing aid. I say, "Oh no, ma'am, this is a hearing aid." She says, "Don't lie to me. I know that is a Bluetooth. My friend has one." I knew this conversation was not going to fix what she thought, so I just shrugged her off. You would think that this story would be over, but this is a Karen we're talking about. As I'm about to leave, the lady says, "You know, since you attacked us with that door, you should give that Bluetooth as compensation." Now, I'm not sure what thought process she was going on, and how dumb she was, but I should have expected it. I said, "What? No, it's a hearing aid." "Don't lie to me. Give it to me." Her kid stepped in, and being a genius, said, "Mom, that is a hearing aid. She needs it." She says, "Shut up, kid. Now give me your Bluetooth." She then grabs my shoulder and tries to rip the hearing aid off me. I tried to push her away, and the kid tried pulling her off me. But the entitled mom was determined to get my hearing aid. It was also hurting a bit from the hearing aid. Luckily, a person who lives in the apartment, who also is my mom's friend, saw what was happening and went to get the landlord. I was really shaken up and began to cry. The landlord was called and threatened to call the cops for harassment on the entitled mom and banned her. She didn't live in the apartment. Thank goodness I moved that very day. You should have just let the entitled mom try on the Bluetooth and then yell into her ear and then show her just how difficult it is to hear somebody. Want to limit my food expenses to a limit? I will make sure I hit the limit every day. So I'm a business consultant, and usually during the week we are at a client site and get paid for travel, meals, etc. The meal reimbursements policy is quite flexible and doesn't limit what we can claim, like some of the other consulting companies. So we can claim lunch, alcohol, whatever. The policy, however, does lay down a guidance for a daily limit of food expenses, based on the country where you're traveling. I capitalized the word guidance, since that is exactly how it was written in the policy. It is a guidance, not a hard limit. For the UK, where my current project is, the limit is £40 per day, which is mostly okay, but can be a bit low if you're in the center of London, for example. Now, I do intermittent fasting, so most of the day I don't have breakfast and lunch, and just have one big meal a day, and have no problems keeping to the £40. Usually around £20. On some days, I might go to a fancy restaurant, have a couple of scotches with a steak, and run up a $60 bill. But during the course of a 5-day week, my average meals would run about £30 a day, if not less. I've never had a problem claiming these expenses in my 9 years with the firm, but recently a new project manager, Reed Bean Counter, came on board. And he sent back a couple of my expense reports for having meal expenses in excess of the £40 for a couple of days, even though the average meal expense over the week was much less than £40. I tried to reason with him, told him that anyway it was a guidance and not a hard limit, and I was keeping the cost down on other days. He refused to budge and said I could only claim £40 a day for food. So guess what? I started doing exactly that. Every day I made sure I was claiming £40 or thereabouts for food. I started buying meals for the homeless people around the train station to make sure I could make up the 40. So now, where I was claiming less than $150 a week for meals, I now claim $200 and get some good karma for it. See, rules without logic are just asking to be taken advantage of. But to be honest, I live on about $2 to $4 of food a day. So just the thought of spending that much on food every single day just seems extremely frivolous to me. Entitled mom thinks her child with a sprained ankle is worse than me in and out of consciousness. So about 2 years ago, my mom and dad had taken me to the hospital because I was extremely sick. Like, I had huge bags under my eyes, I had lost 20 pounds in 5 days, my joints were poking out, and I had no energy. On the way to the hospital, my parents had to make sure I was staying awake in fear of me passing out. I forgot to mention I was also constantly thirsty and peeing a lot. We get there, and they see that I'm in very bad condition. My parents had to help me walk, so they brought me a wheelchair so they could push me to the ER. They looked at me and asked my parents if it's okay to check my blood sugar. My mom gave me the okay, and the doctors checked my blood sugar. They came back and told my mom that I had ketoacidosis, which is a diabetes-caused disease. They then told my parents that my blood sugar was 498, and that I had type 1 diabetes. This broke my parents' heart, and my mom started crying, but they were more heartbroken because I had to check my blood and give myself shots. Well, enter the entitled mom. So this nurse was the best woman I've ever met. She was making sure I was comfortable, while other nurses set up a room for me in the ICU, talking to me, asking how school was going, etc. So the entitled mom was on the other side of the room, which was separated by a curtain. She had come in before me. A lot of doctors were making sure how bad my condition was, checking if my room was almost done, etc. Then the entitled mom makes a mistake. Says, "Excuse me, you need to tend to my son. We were here first." The doctor says, "We are aware of that, ma'am, but this patient is going in and out of consciousness." "I don't care. My son is more important." "Ma'am, this child is on a life or death situation, and your child only has a hurt ankle." The stupid cow says, "I don't care if that child is dying. Tend to my son, now." Says, "Ma'am, I'm going to say this once and only once. Shut the F up. This child is on the verge of dying. Her parents are in absolute despair, and you have the nerve to say your child needs to be helped first because of a hurt ankle?" Says, "How dare you!" "If you bother us one more time, I can and will call the police on you for harassment against the patient and the hospital staff." The entitled mom finally shut her trap and left us alone. I got put in the ICU, got taken out after 1.5 days, got put in the children's section, since I was 11, and I was there for 6 days until I finally went back home. It's been a good 2 years since I was diagnosed, and I'm lucky that I didn't die from ketoacidosis, and dying from not having enough insulin. Some diabetics die from rationing out their insulin because they can't afford it. That's the end of this story. I mean, why would you ever go to the ER for a sprained ankle? I mean, what all can they even do to treat that? It's not like they can just fix it up and then send you on your way all better. Woman makes a false harassment claim against me and nearly gets me fired. 2 weeks later, I get her fired. Oi, here we go. So I was working in HQ for a large and well-known company, cubicle sort of gig. I had been there for 3 years, and she'd been there for about 12. She's known to have a bit of an attitude, and was pretty much next in line to fill a very high position under the CEO. She's always not liked by many of the office workers. Pretty much all the men, and one woman she would constantly make cry. I one day ended up brushing past her in a hurry to hand something off to my supervisor, which he needed ASAP. Both of my hands, quite obviously, occupied holding something at chest level. She ended up filing a harassment claim saying I grabbed her butt. After 2 weeks of unpleasantness, I ended up getting my supervisor to pull cam footage, as they were pretty much about to term me, which saved my butt. Well, I'm friends with the guy she looks to talk to, even though he doesn't much like her. I ended up giving him my recorder pen a few weeks later, and got him to try and egg her into talking about trying to get me fired. He managed to get her to admit that, and 3 other instances where she did get men fired for false harassment claims. I ended up getting the recording back, made a few copies, and ended up handing them off to HR. Each of the 3 other men in question via email, my boss and his boss, her husband, anonymously, and everybody on board. I basically forced the company into a situation where their star player couldn't stay, because A, 2 or 3 men are currently looking to sue, B, I was getting ready to as well, and C, it was completely indisputable. I lost her job and career, any chance at using the place as a reference, and probably damaged her marriage. She's not getting a severance or any of her PTO paid to her. She sent me an email calling me an evil bastard, saying she hopes karma pays it forward soon, and a few other things. Note, I live in a state where I don't need consent to record something. You know, I think the more people use like video and audio recording, the better. I mean, evidence like that is really the ultimate liar destroyer. And just think about how much better everything would be without all the liars. Well, I just ended up cutting the longest story I had prepared, so we're just going to move on to the question now. What's the most amazing coincidence that has ever happened to you? I know we've kind of done this question like 3 times now, but I really like coincidence stories, so yeah. I was at a bar in Dallas on St. Patrick's Day, and I asked a guy about 30 years older than me if I could borrow a lighter. He said something back in a Dublin accent. I asked if he was from Dublin. He said yes. I jokingly said, "I wonder if you know my dad, he's from Dublin." The guy of course says, "No way, it's a huge city." But my grandfather owned a building with his name on it real big, so I asked if he knew the street it was on. Then I asked him if he knew my grandfather's building. Turns out he used to work for my grandfather, and live with my uncle, and was in fact friends with my dad. Small world. Yeah, that's always a fun conversation, you know, when you're out on vacation, and somebody talks to you and they're like, "Oh, you live in Salt Lake City? My friend lives in Salt Lake City, maybe you know him." It's like, you know there's like over 1 million people here. It's not like we all just know each other. I went for coffee with a potential new housemate with 2 other confirmed housemates. We get chatting to the potential new housemate and find out she's from Spain. One of my confirmed housemates is from Spain and asked where she was from. Long story short, they're from the same town, went to the same school, and lived streets away from each other. Further conversation reveals that they were actually part of the same group of friends when they were really young kids, and their parents used to hang out together. And they both coincidentally left Spain at the same time to go to the same, not very well known or big, university, and nearly ended up living together. Well, based on that last sentence, they must have gotten a little too freaked out by all this and decided not to go with that person. I picked up the house phone to call a friend, and he was already on the line. He had called me, and I had picked up the receive just before it had the chance to ring. Blew my friggin' mind. You know, I have had plenty of times where I pick up my phone thinking, I should call this person, and then it starts ringing from that person, but even that's not quite as well timed as this story. When I was in college in Texas, back in the early 90s, I took a summer trip to England. My flight left on the last day of classes. I had an English paper due that day, and the professor insisted that it was due in his box by noon. Of course I procrastinated and didn't turn it in until 1, and mine was the only paper in there. I was sure that I screwed up, but I had to catch my flight. I got to London, and the next day I was on the tube, telling my friend that I was sure that I had failed the class because the prof never got my paper. It's going to be hanging over my head the entire trip, I said. There's no way I'll know if he got my paper. We arrived at our stop, the doors open, and there was my prof, waiting for the train. Professor, did you get my paper? He says, yes, I did. Great, thanks, I said, and went on to enjoy my holiday. Man, imagine any time you needed to talk to somebody, they just happened to appear right where you were somehow. My mate was making fun of me because I had white paint on my blazer, and then he got pooped on by a seagull. Hey, at least the paint doesn't smell quite as bad. When I was in college, my girlfriend and I were doing the hostel thing in Europe one summer. We were broke, but her mom worked for a big airline, so the airfare was super cheap. After London, we went to Paris, and her mom suggested that we look up her old work colleague, Kurt, and see if we could stay with him. Free board? Sounds great. So we called, and his wife answered. Kurt was out of town, but call back tomorrow once they'd had a chance to talk. We did, and Kurt said it would be fine. Gave us directions, and we were set. When we got off at the metro, we were immediately lost, but we called Kurt back and he just said, wait, he'd come and get us. Which he did. Everything was immediately super awkward, but what are you gonna do? The small talk was even more strained. So, you still work for Delta? No, I'm in technical writing. Weird basic details just were not lining up. We got back to their house, I took a shower, his daughter came home from school, and it was probably 90 minutes since we'd met face to face, and Kurt decides to drop this bomb on us. Hey, listen, you seem real nice, but I don't think I know who you are. I talked to my wife though, and if you want, you can stay here for the night. But you're Kurt. I am, but I never worked for Delta, and I don't think we've ever met. True. We called back her mom. Turns out that we had Kurt's phone number 1 digit off. We'd swapped a 5 for a 2, called the wrong number, and got a different American named Kurt, living in Paris, and then we gone to his house, pretended to know each other, I took a shower, and then we all agreed that we were total strangers. We called the right number, got the real Kurt, who lived like 2 miles away, and whose daughter was in the same class at school. Both Kurts were lovely, but we opted to stay with the one we knew. You know, most of these coincidence stories end with like a, whoa, that's so crazy. This one just kind of ends with like, well, this is awkward. Go to a bar in a different country. Bartender wanted to see my identification, so I showed him my state ID. I have somewhat of a rare name. Turns out that was exactly his name as well. He called his father, who came down to meet me as well. We had a good conversation over some beers. Hey, I mean, if you ever meet someone that has the exact same first and last name as you basically just become automatic friends. I mean, you're never gonna forget their name. One time on Facebook, I got a friend request from somebody who had my exact same name, and I looked at his profile, and he just had like 60 friends, all with the exact same first and last name. And I'm just like, huh, are these all like my different clones? Well, looks like that's all the stories we have for today. Yeah, sorry I've been uploading less and less lately. I really think I might just be getting close to ending this channel for good pretty soon. I don't really know how soon, but I'd say I'd probably stick it out to the end of the year at the very most. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll probably have another video tomorrow.